For those of you watching the recording, welcome to Medieval Storytime with the creative Contessa. I'm the Contessa and I am out about in the world, dressed in what I would call medieval Lululemon. I am cosplaying I'm a 15th century countess cosplaying a peasant out here in the wild. So welcome everyone to Medieval Storytime. Today I'm going to be focusing on stories and letters and other literature written by women in celebration of Women's History Month. Good morning, Has, or should I say good afternoon from Daegu, South Korea. So we will be focusing on stories written by women, but not for women necessarily. In fact, most of the things we'll be reading today were written by women for either a general audience or were in some cases correspondence written to men. So we will be getting a picture of the world as told through women's eyes. So it is springtime here. So it's around this way. Then you have the nice bamboo behind me. We are here in Daegu, South Korea, actually, where I am spending a lot of my time. Oh, it's Eid Mubarak. How are you celebrating that there in your corner of the world, Has? Are there any special traditions that go along with it? You know, decorations or food or specific rituals that are performed? Good morning, Lori. Welcome back. Nice to see you. Or good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. Takeda, did you even sleep? Are you having biphasic or triphasic sleep today? Any events happening in the world? Sorry, I was too vague. I meant medieval living history events happening, not. Obviously, there's a whole bunch of garbage happening in the world right now. It's a dumpster fire. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about our first author. We are going to be returning to the Lais of Marie de France. It's not mirrored, so sorry. The lay backwards, as though Leonardo da Vinci had written this, the cover of this book. Marie de France is an authoress writing in the 12th century. She writes in French, but she is actually writing in the court of Henry II of England. He is an Angevin king, and the language of the court at that time in England was absolutely French. It was, Norman French, but it was French. Excuse me. And that was the language spoken by all of the aristocracy, basically, in 12th century England. So she is actually in London writing in French in the 12th century. So in a part, this is actually, I guess, part of, Anglo-Saxon literature, if you will, the literature of Britain, because that's where she composed this. We're going to be, of course, reading a translation of it. The interesting thing about Marie de France, excuse me, I apologize, everyone. The air quality isn't super great. It could be worse. It could be better. Jorge, hola, ¿qué tal? So Marie de France is writing in the 12th century, and she brings to us what she refers to as Breton lais. Lais, these legends, these folk tales, basically from Bretagne, from Brittany. And she claims that she is just basically the conveyor of these stories. She didn't actually invent the stories, she's just telling it in her own voice. But even though she is clearly utilizing stories and tales that had probably existed for decades, if not longer in some cases, she brings them into her era. She lends the characters her voice, or their own voices, in fact. And in some cases, she even gives them, you get a glimpse into their inner psychology, which is not often the case in folk stories or in, some of the Arthurian romances that are floating around. You don't necessarily get a glimpse into their inner psyche. But we do in the Lais of Marie de France. Now, the first one I have chosen for you is, I'm just going to, full disclosure, everyone, it's sad. It's very sad. Well, it's bittersweet sad, and it's not that long, but it is certainly not the happiest of the stories that Marie de France brings to us. Yeah. Kant, Hallöchen, wie geht's überhaupt? Yeah. Just check the triphasic. So, are there any questions before we come in? So here's the format. the format is I will do a complete thorough read through of the story, and then we will go back through it. We will go back through it and we will explore the text passage by passage, delving into subtext and allegory, metaphor, and also discussing the aspects of daily life in France and England in 12th century that are revealed in these stories. So when we're trying to establish a picture of the past, of how people lived in the past, there are many different sources that we can utilize in order to get that picture.
They want to see the surroundings.
Oh, right.
You can keep talking.
So, of those sources, we have text sources such as chronicles, such as expense accounts, wills and inventories, and literature, right? And even though literature is fiction, in this case, so are chronicles, but there are still aspects of real daily life that can be conveyed in these sorts of stories. So yeah, we're actually here on the Riverwalk in Daegu, South Korea, Shincheon, for those of you who are familiar with Daegu at all. And we're actually at twilight, so we won't have daylight much longer, but I thought it's such a lovely evening that we do a quick story time while we are out and about.
Du kannst Deutsch.
Ja, kann ich schon. Ja, kann ich schon. Deutsch ist eigentlich meine zweite Sprache. Kann ich ganz gut.
Du kannst Italienisch, du kannst Spanish,
yeah. Nani, thank you. That's very kind of you. I'm not in China. We are in Korea, Daegu, South Korea. Yeah, where we have spent a lot of time over the last 12 years, honestly. Let's see. Oh, where are we? Where am I from? That's a complicated question. I am originally from a small state called Delaware in the United States. It's on the center of the East Coast, very close to Washington, D.C. I lived the first, 22 years of my life, more or less, there. And then I immigrated to Europe. I immigrated to Germany. I studied in Paris. I studied in Granada, in España, in Spain, and at the University of Heidelberg. And then I eventually got a job as a translator in Germany and lived there for 12 years. And then my life took me to Korea and then very briefly back to America. And now I'm kind of living like a digital nomad while we try to establish the next stage of our lives. So where I'm from is a bit of a complicated question. Where I am right now is South Korea, or as it would have been known in the era of this clothing, Joseon. Yeah. Welcome. Good evening from Daegu to the morning in Ohio. It is early for a Saturday morning for you all. Boston, I love Boston. Since I grew up on the center of the East Coast, I used to do a lot of medieval living history events up in Boston. Yep. Oh, Ashir, welcome. Lovely. Thank you for joining us this morning, all the way from Pakistan. Another individual from Pakistan. I love the international nature of our community. Welcome, everyone.
Eid Mubarak.
I would say that I do have a lot of wonderful experience. I've lived a very happy life. I've been very fortunate in my life, and I'm very grateful for all of the blessings that have come my way. So yeah, I take nothing for granted. And I consider myself a citizen of the world. Not really. I think we all share this planet. We should all view it as a communal property that we share rather than trying to fight for pieces of it. Anyway, that's not the purpose of this channel. This channel is exploring medieval material culture firsthand.
How many languages do you speak?
How many languages do I speak? I'm kind of rusty in a lot of my languages right now because I haven't had much opportunity to speak them. But at times I have been fluent in German, French, Spanish, and Italian in addition to English. I can speak Korean like a 4-year-old. I've been trying to get into an immersive Korean class here at the local university, but that's proving challenging because of visa issues that have to do with the stupidity of bureaucracy. I've had a semester of Mandarin. I've had a semester of Arabic. Yeah, I enjoy languages. Languages are fun.
Are you in Germany now? No, you're in Korea.
Nein, in Deutschland bin ich gar nicht momentan. Das letzte Mal, dass ich in Deutschland war, das ist schon fast dann 6 Monaten her, glaube ich. Yeah, no, I'm not in Germany right now. We're in Daegu, South Korea.
It would take too long to go over my backstory. Sorry, Lais.
Okay. Come to Besiktas. We love you. Oh, well, you off. I love that invitation. Yeah, Has, I had exactly one semester of Arabic 15 years ago, 16 years ago. So yeah, I can sort of still read a little bit of the alphabet, and that's about it. Yeah, I was born and raised in Delaware County. Oh, so very close to Delaware. Yeah. Okay, so everyone, the format is going to be that we are going to read the whole story all the way through. I will only occasionally make witty or acerbic comments. And then we will go back through and read the story together, exploring various pieces of it in more detail, exploring allegory, metaphor, subtext, and also the cultural bits that are discussed referring to life in the 12th century in England and France, and specifically Brittany. So for those who don't know, Brittany is the northwestern corner of France. Saint-Malo and Brest, right? That's all Brittany. And Brittany has its own language that's actually a Celtic language. And it also has its own kind of culture that is not as French as other parts of France. And in fact, until the end of the 15th century, Bretagne was its own independent polity. It was its own duchy. It had its own regnate duke or duchess. And in fact, unlike France, which forbade a woman from becoming a queen regnate, Brittany didn't have those issues. Brittany was much more egalitarian when it came to men and women. So it's very different culturally from other parts of France and other parts of Europe. And those cultural differences can be seen to this day. Now, Brittany in the 12th century is not the same as Brittany now. So traditions that exist now in Brittany don't necessarily reflect a medieval origin. I just want everyone to keep that in mind, that folk traditions are not as old as people generally like to assume they are, sadly. It's just the way of it. Haus 8 Realm. Grüß dich. Herzlich willkommen. Wait, cultural question. How do you run and walk in a dress from, say, an 18th century dress? You hike your skirts up, my friend. That's how. You just pick your skirts up and you run, man. It's no problem. Really isn't. Oh, House 8 Realm, lovely. That's a very nice compliment. Thank you. Okay, so everyone, we're going to dive right in. So if you have any questions, hold them until we do a complete read through, and then I will look at the live chat, and we will answer questions, and then we will go through the text bit by bit.
You got a wide-ranging somebody from
I
the Philippines.
really do. Welcome. Thank you for joining us from the Philippines. We need to stream more often at this time, clearly.
Yeah, no kidding.
Clearly. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to my little corner of the 15th century. I am the Contessa, Madame la Comtesse, the creative Contessa, and I welcome you all to my little private garden here on Shinton River, where we will now be reading one of the Lais of Marie de France. I didn't bring a nice pretty teacup. Don't look away, everyone.
Look away.
I didn't bring a pretty little cup for my tea. Yeah, this is lovely bamboo growing behind us. Yep. Okay. Nirvana, welcome. Right. Okay, so let us delve into this Breton Lais, this folktale from Bretagne. This is the tale of Laustic. I shall tell you an adventure about which the Breton made a lay. Laustic was the name, I think. They gave it in their land. In French, it is rossignol and nightingale in proper English. At Saint-Malo in that country, there was a famous city. 2 knights lived there. They both had strong houses. From the goodness of the 2 barons, the city acquired a good name. One had married a woman, wise, courtly, and handsome. She set a wonderfully high value on herself, within the bounds of custom and usage. The other was a bachelor, well known amongst his peers for bravery and great valor. He delighted in living well. He jousted often, spent widely, and gave out often what he had. He also loved his neighbor's wife. He asked her, begged her so persistently, and there was such good in him that she loved him more than anything, as much for the good that she heard of him as because he was close by. They loved each other discreetly and well, concealed themselves, and took care that they weren't seen or disturbed or suspected. And they could do this well enough since their dwellings were close to each other. Their houses were next door, and so were their rooms and their towers. There was no barrier or boundary except a high wall of dark stone. From the rooms where the lady slept, if she went to the window, she could talk to her love on the other side, and he to her, and they could exchange their possessions by tossing and throwing them. There was scarcely anything to disturb them. They were both quite at ease, except that they couldn't come together completely for their pleasure, for the lady was closely guarded when her husband was in the country. Yet they always managed, whether at night or in the day, to be able to talk together. No one could prevent their coming to the window and seeing each other there. For a long time, they loved each other, until one summer, when the woods and meadows were green and the orchards blooming, the little birds, with great sweetness, were voicing their joy above the flowers. It is no wonder if he understands them, he who has love to his desire. I'll tell you the truth about the night. He listened to them intently, and to the lady on the other side, both with words and looks. At night, when the moon shone, when her lord was in bed, she often rose from his side and wrapped herself in a cloak. She went to the window because of her lover, who, she knew, was leading the same life, awake most of the night. Each took pleasure in the other's sight, since they could have nothing more. But she got up and stood there so often that her lord grew angry and began to question her, to ask why she got up and where she went. "My lord," the lady answered him, "there is no joy in this world like hearing the nightingale sing. That's why I stand there. It sounds so sweet at night that it gives me great pleasure. It delights me so, and I so desire it, that I cannot close my eyes." When her lord heard what she had said, he laughed in anger and ill will. He set his mind on one thing, to trap the nightingale. There was no valet in his house that he didn't set to making traps, nets, or snares, which he then had placed in the orchard. There was no hazel tree or chestnut where they did not place a snare or lime until they trapped and captured. When they had caught the nightingale, they brought it, still alive, to the lord. He was very happy when he had it. He came to the lady's chambers. "Lady," he said, "where are you? Come here, speak to us. I have trapped the nightingale that kept you awake so much. From now on, you can lie in peace. He will never again awaken you." When the lady heard him, she was sad and angry. She asked her lord for the bird, but he killed it out of spite. He broke its neck in his hands, too vicious an act, and threw the body on the lady. Her smock was stained with blood, a little on her breast. Then he left the room. The lady took the body. She wept hard and cursed those who had betrayed the nightingale, who made the traps and snares, for they took a great joy from her. "Alas," she said, "now I must suffer. I won't be able to get up at night or go and stand in the window where I used to see my love. I know one thing for certain. He'd think I was pretending. I must decide what to do about this. I shall send him the nightingale and relate the adventure." In a piece of samite, embroidered in gold, in writing, she wrapped the little bird. She called one of her servants, charged him with her message, and sent him to her love. He came to the knight, greeted him in the name of his lady, and related the whole message to him, and then presented the nightingale. When everything had been told and revealed to the knight, after he had listened well, he was very sad about the adventure, but he wasn't mean or hesitant. He had a small vessel fashioned, with no iron or steel in it. It was all pure gold and good stones, very precious and very dear. The cover was carefully attached. He placed the nightingale inside, and then he had the casket sealed. He carried it with him always. This adventure was told. It could not be concealed for long. The Breton made a lay about it, which men called the Nightingale, Laustic, in the language of the Breton. The end. Yes, so I warned you. I know some of you weren't here at the beginning when I first issued the frank warning about this story. It's a sad story. But there is a lot, even though it is brief and even though it is sad, there is some very interesting imagery contained within, and also some details about life in the 12th century that I think are very interesting to explore. So, yeah, thank you for those lovely gifts, Crystal. Very much appreciate that. Yeah, so I'm wearing 15th century. I'm not wearing 12th century clothes. Unfortunately, I no longer have any 12th century clothing. I am wearing 15th century, what I call 15th century French Lululemon. This is sort of casual attire for the casual countess. But this story that we just finished, this Lais, written by Marie de France, she was such a popular author that her stories are copied for centuries after she first writes them in the 12th century. And not only are they copied, her stories become the basis, get incorporated into other stories, into Arthurian romances, in fact. So she is an authoress whose impact lasts for centuries, right? So even though she's writing in the 12th centuries, her stories have a timeless quality to them. And it seems like what we might call a fairy tale, even though this particular story has no magic about it. But it's really a story about love and about, thank you, XX Reaper, really appreciate that. It's really a story about love and about a love that isn't at all physical, because our two lovers never get to meet, actually. Okay, questions or comments before we delve in and go through it bit by bit. Question: do you think you would enjoy living in the 15th century as much as the modern day? No. No, I do not. Okay, so here's
clear on that.
First off, if you're enjoying this, please double tap your screen to like and subscribe. And I thank you all who've given me gifts and super chats, and I thank all my members who are out there and my patrons and my subscribers on Facebook. But yeah, and if you are interested, we tagged this book, right?
Yep, I tagged that book.
If you would like to get this book for yourself and read it, it's all Marie de France's Lais in translation. Each one has a little essay that it explicates it. Oh, different one. Okay.
Yeah,
right. Either way, we tagged it. If you purchase the book, that is a nice one. If you purchase the products that we've tagged, I do get a commission. I'm just going to be completely mercenary about that. Completely frank and honest. Oh, are you Amish? Everyone take a shot. That's one of the Creative Contessa's drinking games. Every time someone asks if I'm Amish, take a shot. I'm not Amish. I'm a 15th century noblewoman cosplaying a peasant. Anyway, would I like to live in the 15th century? No, not unless I was somehow had some kind of immunity and impermeability, and I would be guaranteed of not contracting a disease or dying from one of the many horrible ways in which you could die in the 15th century. And I'm not even talking about violent ways. I'm just talking about pathogens and microbes. In the 15th century in Europe, the plague comes back every 10 to 20 years, all across Europe. The population doesn't start resurging in Europe really until the 17th or 18th centuries. So even if I don't die in a famine or end up slain as part of the marauding knights that are part of the mess that is the 100 Years' War, it's still likely I'm going to, develop some kind of bacterial infection from a cut that we might refer to as a paper cut now. So no, I don't want to go live in the 15th century. But that, take a shot. Are you Mormon? No.
Same person though, so we don't get to drink. Only once per person.
Yeah, so no, I would not want to live then, but there are aspects about the way people lived in the 15th century that I think it would behoove us to actually go back to adopting those ways of life. Specifically, communal living. Multiple generations in a home is definitely healthier than living all by yourself in an apartment, getting depressed and spending your whole time staring at a screen, which I know is ironic because you all are staring at a screen, staring at me. But I think we need to start interacting more with each other. 15th century life, every evening, everyone across all levels of society sang songs together, played music together, danced, played games, told stories in person, in large groups. That was part of life. Dancing happened almost every day. Music happened almost every day. There were holidays all the time where there was great feasting and revelry across all levels of society. Life was much less hectically paced. Yes, they had clocks, but they weren't quite as accurate as they are now. Not everyone had them. And life just wasn't scheduled to a millisecond the way it is now. So people were actually more relaxed. Diets were actually more nutritious, especially amongst the lower classes of society in the 15th century. So I think there's a lot of aspects of daily life from the 15th century from which we could learn. Yeah. But that's why I enjoy doing living history, because I can go and focus on recreating and enjoying the healthy, salubrious, and engaging, entertaining aspects of the 15th century. And I don't have to worry about the pre-antibiotic, pre-vaccine issues that they faced. Yeah. Out of curiosity, does living like you do make the pagan lens make sense?
Nothing to do with that in any way.
I'm not certain what you mean by making the pagan lens make sense, because in the Middle Ages, Christianity, in Western Europe, Christianity was the game basically by the 10th century, the 11th century. Christianity, Judaism, or Islam, depending on where you are, but in Abrahamic religion, anyway.
Oh, Aaron.
Oh, Aaron, welcome. Lovely to see you. Nice. Welcome back. Good to see you. Yeah. I'm glad you were able to join us. Thank you for popping by.
Somebody from
Nice.
India now.
Right. Sweaty hands. Welcome to my community. Yeah. Keyword that Mason's on. Hi, Mason. Good morning.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I do believe that a person named Jesus lived. Do I believe he was the Son of God? I'm agnostic. The jury's out in my world. Yeah. I don't know. What was the average expected lifetime of a man in those days? I wonder what it was like to watch everyone that got polio or the plague die. So interestingly, polio was not common in the Middle Ages in Europe, but plague was, and I've read lots of letters from the era, from the 14th and 15th century, talking about their children or their family members dying of plague, and they were heartbroken. It was a heartbreaking experience. This idea that medieval people didn't love their children because they died early, nonsense. They loved them maybe even more intensely because they weren't certain how long their children would be with them. But if you control for infant mortality, actually in Europe, medieval Europe, lifespans weren't that much longer than they are now. Once you control for infant mortality and women who died giving birth to children, people regularly lived into their 50s through their 70s, and we have many people we know who lived into their 80s. So men, however, depending on their station in life, men at arms were likely not to live to a terribly ripe old age, because they were likely to die of dysentery on campaign. That is not what everyone wants to think of when they think of the glorious medieval battlefield death, but that's the fact, that most knights, most men at arms did not die a glorious, clean death on the field of battle, being struck down by a beautiful blow from a sword. No. They got an arrow in the knee and then they died 3 days later of sepsis. That's a real story about how Diego di Cavaignalia, a puissant and powerful knight from Italy, died in 1481 on crusade. In southern Italy. So yeah, men had a shorter lifespan than women did once you control for child mortality and for maternal mortality.
Prince Yadav wants to know where you're from. Everybody drink.
Yeah,
Quaker.
I'm not a Quaker. Everyone take a shot. Let me see. What was the question?
Where are you from?
Oh, where am I from? That's a complicated question. I'm originally from Delaware, from a small state called Delaware in the United States, but I've spent almost all of my adult life living abroad. So I consider myself really a citizen of the world. Right now, everyone, you are in Daegu, South Korea. Welcome to what in the 15th century would have been known as Joseon. Can I speak more slowly, please? I can, except the comments are coming pretty quickly. I will try to speak more slowly. Let me see. No, in the Middle Age. Oh yeah, dysentery. Yeah, dysentery is basically where you can't control your bowels. Yeah, that's what Aria was from Winter Hell was referring to. Basically, dysentery is where you can't control your bowels. They liquefy sometimes, and if you don't die from that, then you just die from kind of dehydration. Yeah, disease was common, and if you contracted it, it was a problem.
You speak French, really?
Oui, bien sûr que je parle français. Oh my goodness. Let me see. Sometimes I get dysentery. No, I don't think you do, Kevin Spencer. You wouldn't live very long. Dysentery is a serious bacterial infection where you don't stop. It requires medical intervention. Most people don't survive dysentery. And it still kills people in developing places, in developing countries where sanitation is an issue. Yeah, yep. Okay, I heard they can't even drink clean water, so they drink beer or something. The myth of no clean water. It's not true. The water in the Middle Ages, in fact, river water is so clean in places even like Paris that we have cookbooks from, say, the end of the 14th century, the Ménagier de Paris, that actually instruct you to go get clean water from the Seine, because that's where you're going to get clean water from. So no, that it's a myth that everyone's water was just so befouled that they couldn't drink it, and so they only drank beer. Now, there were places where that was the case, but that wasn't every place. And they frequently had cisterns where they would collect rainwater, and that was clean water. And depending on where you lived, if you had a nice free-flowing body of water, then that was probably pretty nice. There were a few cities where it was problematic, but not everywhere, and not for the entirety of the Middle Ages. Let me see. Oh yeah, President Garfield died of infection. Poor man. He died a horrible, horrible, horrible death. God, did he. Oof. Am I Cajun? I am not Cajun. That's a first. I am definitely not Cajun.
Do you get to drink for Cajun?
Why am I wearing these clothes? So this is actually a medieval living history channel. That's the theme of this channel. So welcome to my 15th century living history world. This is medieval story time. We just finished reading a sad and yet also romantic story from the 12th century that was written by Marie de France, an authoress writing in the court of Henry II. So I'm dressed because this is my medieval living history channel. Do I wear these clothes all the time? No. But basically, once I get dressed in the day, for example, I had a medieval live stream earlier where we talked about medieval magic and astrology. Once I'm dressed for the day, I'm done. I'm not changing clothes again. So I do spend a lot of my life dressed in 15th century clothing, but not because I necessarily feel like I have to. I just don't want to change clothes lots and lots of times. And actually, as it turns out, my 15th century clothing is just as pragmatic and lovely for daily use as modern clothes. So, yeah.
What's the thing on your head?
What's the thing on my head? It's not a coif, it's a kerchief. This is a kerchief. It's a linen covering that has many practical purposes. Amongst them is helping keep my air clean from the pollution, which, by the way, we still have polluted air in the modern world, maybe more so even than medieval air would have been in some cases. It also keeps the sun off of my head when it's hot outside, so it helps keep me cool. In the winter, when it gets cool, it provides an extra layer of insulation and helps me stay warm. So it's a multi-purpose item, and when it's sunny, then I can put forward the brim, and I have basically medieval sunglasses. This helps keep the glare out of my face. Right. So it's called a kerchief, or a couvre-chef, or a kerchief, couvre-chef, cover chief. It's got all sorts of names in the 15th century. Yeah. Okay, where did I learn French? J'ai appris français à l'école et à l'université. J'ai habité à Paris pendant un très petit temps. Okay, cosplay functionality. Yeah, so living history is a way to explore the past by experiencing various aspects firsthand. And if you check out my channel, welcome everyone who's just joining, double tap that screen if you're enjoying and consider subscribing. Have you set the subscriber things? You need to set those up. I am not able to set those up for my phone. If you check out my channel, I have for subscribers. If you check out the channel, I have lots of tutorials and videos about daily life, practical tutorials about daily life in the Middle Ages. I've got dance tutorials, I've got sewing tutorials, I've got project blogs about making medieval clothing, I've got video essays about medieval tableware, medieval rings, medieval etiquette. I've got lots of getting dressed videos if you want to see the process of getting dressed from the skin out, with his descriptions of the history of each of the garments. So I've got lots of content about medieval life, but not great man history. I don't really care much for great man history. I prefer understanding how people lived their daily lives and how their daily lives and daily life impacted the great men of history. Yep.
Okay, if you've been commenting, now you need to subscribe. Your first taste was free.
Yeah, your first taste was free. Okay, so let's go back to our story of Laustic, le rossignol, the nightingale. Right, we're about, well, I guess the little path lights have come on. We'll see if we have enough light from the path lights to keep going. Happily, my vision is pretty decent at night, so I can still read the text, sort of. Okay, so the Nightingale. So we have the typical opening here by Marie de France. She says, I shall tell you an adventure about which the Breton made a lay. Laustic was the name, I think. They gave it in their land. So this is a Breton word, and it's the Breton word for a nightingale. And you all may remember that there is a reference to the nightingale in another much later romantic story, Romeo and Juliet. Right? After their wedding night, she talks about hearing the nightingale as the harbinger of the night, when in fact it is the crow that was crowing, hailing the dawn. Right? So there is absolutely in medieval and apparently Renaissance and early modern mythos, there is a connection between the song, the beautiful song of the nightingale, and it being a symbol of lovers and the interaction of people who are in love. Yeah. So she sets the story in Saint-Malo, which is in Bretagne, in the northwestern corner of France. Has anyone been to Saint-Malo? I have. It is a beautiful city. It has the most gorgeous late Renaissance walls, and you can walk all the way around the city overlooking the ocean. It's a really beautiful city. I love Saint-Malo, and I love the ocean in general. So combine a historical city with gorgeous historical architecture plus the ocean, that's a win for me. And I love the people in Bretagne and Brittany. They're friendly, they're warm, they've got a great joie de vivre. And of course, who doesn't love galette, buckwheat crepes? Like, forget crepes made out of boring old wheat flour, blah. Galette made out of this rich, nutty buckwheat flour, yeah, that's where it's all at. Yeah, okay. So at Saint-Malo, in that country, there was a famous city. Two knights lived there. They both had strong houses. So when we talk about two knights in the 12th century, knighthood is just really coming into its full formation in the 12th century in France. Before that, there were mounted warriors, but the idea of knighthood as more or less as we understand it, medieval knighthood, is really solidified in the 12th century. And the 12th century is a time in which there are great tournament circuits all over Europe. It's a sport, but it's a dangerous sport, and it's a sport that trains men for war. And it's basically a way to keep these men who are have been trained to be violent. It's a way to keep them engaged and to harness their violent energies in a more peaceful manner that doesn't have them always just going off and engaging in war with their neighbors. So instead, people start hosting tournaments. Cities host tournaments, kings host tournaments, counts, dukes, duchesses, they host tournaments. And so there's literally a circuit. It's hard to imagine, right? In a pre-modern world, in a world without motor vehicles, there was a circuit, and knights actually went on the circuit and went on tourneys. If you've ever seen the movie A Knight's Tale, it actually got some things really right, and the idea of a tournament circuit is one of them. So you have these two knights, and they both had strong houses. Now, you might think the word house here means a building. It does not. It does not mean a building at all. It is referring to their households. It is referring to their private lorddoms, their fiefdoms. So their households are not just their family members. Their households are their family members, are their servants, are their retainers, are their men-at-arms, are their squires, are their pages. So they had these strong houses. And that same idea is also picked up centuries later in Romeo and Juliet, when you have the Capulets and the Montagues, right? Those are two strong, and Shakespeare uses those words, two houses equal in dignity. Again, not architecture. These are basically their own mini states unto themselves in a certain way, right? Okay, questions or comments I need to address?
Not Yeah. No, I think you're.
Okay. So they both had strong houses, which means they're equally strong, basically. So the one can't really get an upper hand over the other. Yeah. So from the goodness of the two barons, the city acquired a good name. So the reputation of these two barons, these two knights, actually gave the city a good reputation. And yet we find out that one of these two men is not so good at all. In fact, he's a right bastard. Right.
That is right.
Hmm?
The more he reads about it, the more it's really seemed like it was like Formula One or NASCAR, support
Yes.
structure, vendors, the whole nine yards.
Yeah, Takeda, you're absolutely right. Takeda notes that the more he reads about it, the more it seems like the medieval tourney circuit was like Formula One or NASCAR. Support structures, vendors, etc. 100%. When a tournament was being hosted in a city, when one of these great deeds of arms was being hosted in a city, the city would frequently turn the central square into the place where the tournament was held. They would build stands, they would build a list, and in this time, jousting wasn't necessarily, it wasn't jousting on a jousting list like we know it today, where there's this long fence down the center. No. There was a big field that was a big list field that had wooden fencing built around it, and there were knights on horseback, and there were men at arms on foot, and it was just these big crazy melees that were basically mini mock battles. Right, so it was pure chaos, basically. But yeah, there would be food vendors would be there, merchants would come and sell their wares. People would actually rent their houses out to the visitors, to the people who were actually coming to attend these tournaments. So it was a way for people to get extra income. Inns would be full. They would actually fly their banners from the windows of the lodgings where they were staying. It was a big deal, and it was a really big economic driver in this era. Yep. You obviously don't know what they considered a list. I do, baby choker. In fact, I do 15th century reenactment of deeds of arms. So yeah, I definitely know what they considered a list. And in the 12th century, it wasn't the same as the 15th century. The 12th century had a very different tournament format. It was much more dangerous, actually, and much less regulated and much less controlled, and resulted in a lot more injuries and death than later on. I'm not spreading disinformation, baby choker. You're about to get put in timeout, my friend.
I don't have that person.
Yeah, I don't know.
It must be on Instagram. Are you?
No, we're not restreaming. Nope.
Oh, I'm in the top chat.
Yeah, get rid of that nonsense. I'm definitely not spreading misinformation, baby choker. Are you talking about the 12th century? Because I am. Have you studied much 12th century deeds of arms? Because I have, using primary sources, in fact. So, in the original language in some cases. Have you? Just wondering. I've actually looked at manuscripts and read directly from the manuscript. Have you? Okay. Yeah, I don't know. Okay, so.
Wow, they subscribed, so they can say that.
Wow. But thank you for supporting my channel by commenting, because, every comment just pushes me in the algorithm, so I appreciate you. So, one had married a woman, wise, courtly, and handsome. She set a wonderfully high value on herself within the bounds of custom and usage. The other was a bachelor, well known among his peers for bravery and great valor. He delighted in living well. He jousted often, spent widely, and gave out what he had. He also loved his neighbor's wife. He asked her, begged her so persistently, and there was such good in him that she loved him more than anything, as much for the good that she heard of him as because he was close by. Right. So, and that's true, actually. Baby Choker did have to subscribe to say that. But also, Baby Choker, that name doesn't do you much credit, actually, now that I think about it. You might want to reconsider your name. Just putting that out there. Right. So, we have here one knight who is married and one who is a bachelor. And, one of the things you have to notice is that there's a couple of qualities that are important, that are considered valuable, right? We have a woman who was wise, courtly, and handsome, right? So she's smart, she makes good decisions, she's well-mannered, she's courtly, and she's beautiful, right? The handsome part. So it's not just a question of her being beautiful. She must also be well educated, and she must also be intelligent and must be sage. So that's one of the things I love about the characters in Marie de France. The women especially are not just two-dimensional. They're not just props in the story, right? We actually know a little bit about her. So he jousted often, spent widely, and gave out what he had. So we have generosity here. And generosity comes to be codified later on as one of the virtues, depending on the source you read, as one of the very important virtues of knighthood, largesse, right? Giving out what he had. So not being stingy, not being a miser, but actually giving to whomever. And in fact, alms were a very big part of the expectation of the wealthy members of medieval society. It's not like today. It's not like today where we don't expect our rich bastards to actually give back to the community. In the Middle Ages, giving alms was almost institutionalized because people would actually carry a purse called an aumônière, which is an alms purse, and it had coins in it. And the whole purpose was that if you were out and about and you encountered a beggar or someone who was obviously experiencing hard times, you would just give them coins from your purse. And it was expected that this kind of generosity would actually also shorten your time in purgatory, because the assumption in most of medieval Europe was that everyone was going to purgatory for at least some time. Almost no one was expected to go straight to heaven. You had to first go to purgatory, serve your time, and then continue onward from, whoa, what's happening?
It's getting really dark.
No, it's okay. You can't, I can't think if there's a spotlight in my face.
I wasn't sure if you'd be able to read.
Right. Right. So generosity, almsgiving was a very big part of medieval society. It was very important that everyone engage in that. And there was an idea towards poverty, that poverty was not a moral failing, that at least not in the way we think it is now. And so therefore it was our duty as Christians to lift up the poor and to provide for them and to help improve their lives. And so Marie mentions that when she says he spent widely and gave out what he had. So he's not miserly. So she's setting us up to like this knight very much, in fact, especially because he apparently doesn't kill nightingales like some people do. You all need to pop out your wonderful newer oil chandelier. Oh, it's in Mississippi, Takeda. We can't do that right now. Also, we're out on the river, so we definitely can't break out anything here. Although I don't think we're supposed to be lighting fires here on the riverside.
Probably not. This grass looks very dry still.
Yeah. Okay. So he loved his neighbor's wife. She loved him back because he was as much for and this is the funny part, she loved him more than anything, as much for the good that she heard of him as because he was close by. So it's a little bit, it's an arrangement of convenience, right? She's thumbs upping, is that a real phrase? Yeah, so she loves him as much for the things she's heard of him as for the fact that he's proximal to her. So it's not exactly necessarily the deepest foundation for a relationship, right? So they loved each other discreetly and well, concealed themselves, and took care that they wouldn't be seen or disturbed or suspected. And they could do this well enough since their dwellings were close by. Their houses were next door, and so were their rooms and their towers. So architecture, urban architecture in France in the 12th century is not necessarily the way people imagine it now. There were a lot of sort of fortified mini castles in a lot of cities across Europe. And so they were called hôtels in French. The word hotel comes from the word for these little mini city castles, city fortified palaces, right? So there were plenty of half timber structures as well, but the well-heeled and the warrior class especially wanted to have a fortified structure in the cities, because that's how quickly things could turn. You could easily, go from everything being peaceful and good between these great houses, and then the next day there's some kind of assassination attempt, and they're actually having to fight off an attack on their home in the middle of the city. So when they talk about towers, their houses were next door, and so were their rooms and their towers. They mean that. So these are tower houses, basically, right? Is probably the best way to describe it, I guess, a tower house in the city. So it's, yeah. Not many of these have survived for various reasons. World War II, World Wars I and II were really rough on architecture in lots of parts of Europe. So, yeah, Haas has life says mini castle cottage. Yeah, yep, not far.
Chateau was translated on yours. The cottage, chateau mini castle.
Mini castle cottage. Right. So here they are in their towers, and the rooms look at each other and communicate. And so apparently they can see each other. There was no barrier or boundary other than a high wall of dark stone between their two tower houses. From the rooms where the lady slept, if she went to the window, she could talk to her love on the other side, and he to her, and they could exchange their possessions by tossing and throwing them. Right. So this is a little interesting. She could talk to her love, and he to her, and they could exchange their possessions. And this translation isn't necessarily always the most eloquent, by tossing and throwing them. I think there probably could have been a more elegant way of phrasing that. But anyway, exchanging possessions is a big part of the medieval courtly love relationship, right? So in the 12th century, we actually have this manual of courtly love composed by Andreas Capellanus. It contains 3 books, and the 3rd book basically talks about how the first 2 books should be ignored and how you shouldn't behave that way. I suspect that actually the first 2 books were supposed to be a manual about courtly love, and then the 3rd one was composed later by someone who was moralizing the first 2 books. That's my suspicion. I haven't been able to prove that theory. But in any case, in Andreas Capellanus's rules of fin amour, of what we now call courtly love, but it wasn't called that in the Middle Ages, he actually talks about gifts that are appropriate to be exchanged between lovers. And there's a whole host of things that lovers would exchange, and some of these love tokens have survived, but they're not as token-like as you might imagine. Many of them are practical. Girdles, so belts, were exchanged frequently. Let's see if I can tilt this down a little bit more. Yeah, girdles were exchanged frequently. Purses, those aumônières, those alms purses were exchanged frequently. Shoes, stockings, brooches, little bits of jewelry and pendants, rings were exchanged. So basically, I can't help but imagine there's a comic aspect to this story, whether it's intended or not, of these 2 lovers in their 2 tower houses with their communicating tower chambers, tossing objects back and forth, love tokens back and forth. There is room for comic relief in the envisioning of that. Yeah. Let me see. Question, oil lamp, we light it with fire. Yubaba, welcome. Thank you for joining us. If you're enjoying, don't forget to double tap that screen. Right. So they've been throwing gifts back and forth. There was scarcely anything to disturb them. They were both quite at ease, except that they couldn't come together completely for their pleasure, for the lady was closely guarded when her husband was in the country. So the word country means more like region or area. It doesn't mean country like we understand a country now, as in a well-organized polity with very hard boundaries and borders. That's not what they mean here. Country in the 12th century and most of the Middle Ages, if not all of the Middle Ages, refers more towards a region, right? So if he's in the area, apparently her husband guarded her closely. So you have this idea of this lady in the tower, basically, who is a kind of semi-prisoner. Maybe not, in fact, for all we know, maybe she can go out and go about her daily life accompanied by a damsel, no doubt. But there is still this trope of the lady in the tower, right? Okay. Comment, have you ever seen them light the candles in a Christian church service? Oh yeah, okay, yeah, Takeda, yeah. It's an interesting process, lighting the candles in a church service, especially if it's one of those big giant medieval chandeliers. So, yet they always managed, whether at night or in the day, to be able to talk together. No one could prevent their coming to the window and seeing each other there. For a long time, they loved each other, until one summer, when the woods and meadows were green and the orchards were blooming. So, we have here the coming of the summer and the greenery, and May is especially, the green is associated with the Maying, and the Maying is the season of love in the Middle Ages, and that may have in fact pre-Christian origins possibly, but you know, this idea of the flowers are blooming, there is sweetness in the air, the birds are singing, the meadows are green, and the woods have also have leafed. Right, that whole idea is we're talking about the flourishing not just of nature, but it's a metaphor for the flourishing of love. Right, so the little birds, with great sweetness, were voicing their joy above the flowers. It is no wonder if he understands them, he who has love to his desire. I'll tell you the truth about the night. He listened to them intently and to the lady on the other side, both with words and looks. Right, so we have here the singing of the birds is very clearly a metaphor for the voices of lovers. And that idea is actually picked up by Chaucer in the 14th century when he talks about, he has a whole poem about the courtship of birds, and it's one of the earliest references to Valentine's Day as a day when lovers pair off. He refers to Valentine's Day as the time when each bird finds its mate. So the idea of birds representing lovers is, as you can see, not new in the 14th century and is a common theme, a common trope throughout much medieval romance literature, right? Okay, so at night, when the moon shone, when her lord, being her husband, was in bed, she often rose from his side and wrapped herself in a cloak. She went to the window because of her lover, who she knew was leading the same life, awake most of the night. So each took pleasure in the other's sight, since they could have nothing more. So we have here a very clear statement that their love is not physical. They can never, there is no physical interaction between them. They only communicate from their towers, right? So there is in that degree a certain purity about their love. This is 100% fan amour. This is a very common trope in medieval literature, and there are many people, scholars and amateur, professional academics and independent scholars who debate whether these kinds of relationships ever actually happened. But I've read enough source texts from the Middle Ages that I'm pretty certain that they were real, that it did really in fact happen. That this isn't just a trope that occurs in literature, but it is debatable, and you can actually get a good polemic going, in fact. So if you're enjoying, welcome everyone to Medieval Storytime. We're just going through the tale of Laustic, the Nightingale, le Rossignol, and we're just reading through it bit by bit together now and exploring the metaphors and the subtext. So, each took pleasure in the other's sight, since they could have nothing more. But she got up and stood there so often that her lord grew angry and began to question her, to ask why she got up and where she went. So he began to suspect, obviously he's not stupid or completely unobservant, he began to suspect that it wasn't just going to the window to ponder the night sky, right? My lord, the lady answered him, there is no joy in this world like hearing the nightingale sing. That's why I stand there. It sounds so sweet at night that it gives me great pleasure. It delights me so, and I so desire it, that I cannot close my eyes. Right. So she claims that it's the nightingale. But as I said, the nightingale was a known representative for a lover's song. And so by her saying that, and saying that it is the nightingale's song that has awakened her, her husband, who is apparently not a dolt and a dullard, probably picks up on the fact that the nightingale is a metaphor for someone else, in fact. When her lord heard what she had said, he laughed in anger and ill will. He set his mind on one thing, to trap the nightingale. Right. There was no valet in his house that he didn't set to making traps, nets, or snares, which he then had placed in the orchard. Right? So he has this, as we talked about earlier, his house is not just a building, but his household, his retinue of servants, of liege people, of his own men-at-arms, his pages, his squires, his valets, his personal servants, right? And he basically sets them all to making traps, nets, and snares and having them placed in the orchard. And this is an aspect of medieval urban architecture that is often forgotten because modern cities are so densely packed with architecture that it's hard to imagine. But many medieval city homes, even tower houses, palazzi as they would be called in Italian, they had their own little gardens. They had their own little orchards. And if you look at actual medieval maps depicting cities, you can actually see these spaces. They're generally, you can spot them, you can identify them, right? So this is not an orchard somewhere out in the countryside. This is an orchard inside the walls of the city. So there was no hazel tree or chestnut where he did not place a snare or a lime until they trapped and captured the nightingale. When they had caught the poor bird, they brought it, still alive, to the Lord. Right? Because all these traps and snares are generally designed to capture things alive. Because sometimes they didn't want to actually kill it and eat it immediately, and it's better to keep your prey alive until it's time to eat it than to kill it and have to eat it more or less immediately or come up with some other preservation method. So they caught the bird alive, which is not necessarily good for the bird, unfortunately. He was very happy when he held the bird in his hands. He came to the lady's chambers. "Lady," he said, "where are you? Come here and speak to us." Right? You can only imagine the sort of malicious glee in his voice, an almost saccharine quality to it that probably should have put her on her guard. Right? "I have trapped the nightingale that kept you awake so much. From now on, you can lie in peace. He will never again awaken you," right? And it's very clear here that we are no longer talking about the nightingale, actually. We are, but we aren't, right? When the lady heard him, she was sad and angry. She asked her lord for the bird, but he killed it out of spite, right? So this is not really a good man, clearly. Jealousy, you can say that perhaps jealousy makes people, makes monsters of us all. And perhaps he's normally a good person, but in this case, his jealousy brought out the worst in him. But I don't know, he seems to be taking a malicious pleasure in this. This seems very premeditated. No. So, he broke its neck in his hands, too vicious an act, and threw the body on the lady. Her smock was stained with blood, a little speck on her breast. Then he left the room. So, her smock being stained with blood. So first off, a smock, let me show you for those who don't know, this is a smock, this white linen undergarment. So clearly, she is not fully dressed for whatever reason. And he throws this bird at her. And so there ends up with a little speck of blood on her breast. And I'm pretty certain it's probably her left breast. So it's a symbol for heartbreak, right? For having stabbed her in the heart, in essence.
I just tagged one so people can see it.
You just tagged a what? Oh, a smock? Yeah, if you are looking to purchase a smock, we've apparently tagged one. So if you decide you want to buy one instead of make one, or if you just want to see what a smock looks like, we tagged it under the product. So you can see what smocks look like when they're not under a kirtle the way this one is.
Click on them anyways. We don't know if it helps.
Yeah, So, the lady took the little body. She wept hard and cursed those who had betrayed the nightingale, who made the traps and snares, for they took great joy from her. I feel like she's not cursing the right person here. I feel like the servants are just doing what they were told, and it's actually her miscreant, malicious, malevolent husband whom she should be cursing. But instead, she curses the people who made the snares and the traps. I think that's misplaced. I think that anger is completely misplaced. "Alas," she said, "now I must suffer. I will not be able to get up at night or go and stand in the window where I used to see my love." And that's because this is hard for us to imagine. Well, why can't she just wake herself up? Because it was the nightingale that was awakening her. Because nightingales have a specific biorhythm, and they sing at a specific time. So his singing was in fact awakening both her and her lover in his neighboring tower house. And so now that the nightingale will not sing anymore, she is concerned that there will be nothing to awaken her from her sleep, from her slumber, for them to have their secret meetings in the tower rooms. Right? So I know one thing for certain: he will think that I was pretending. I must decide what to do about this. So she's concerned that he will think that she'd been pretending their love all the time and that she's just stopped coming because she's bored, basically. So she doesn't have much faith in his belief in their relationship, I suppose. I shall send him the nightingale and relate the adventure. Now, the word adventure is often translated here, and I think I'm a professional translator, for those who don't know, and I think it's a bad translation, especially for a modern audience. The word adventure in the Middle Ages had more the idea of just the story, of the tale of the happening. It wasn't what we consider an adventure where you go out into the world and things happen to you and then you come back. It just means the story, right? The whole story, the whole happening. So she's going to send him the nightingale and tell him what happened. And here's a very sad image. It's sort of a mini funeral, actually. In a piece of samite, which is a beautiful and very expensive luxury silk in the 12th century, embroidered in gold, and in both gold and I think if I wanted to go back and look at the original French, I'm pretty certain that it is embroidered in gold with writing. So there's actually writing that is embroidered into this piece of samite. And when they say embroidered in gold, they mean that. They mean thread of gold. They mean gold that is actually thread. Right? Or yes, that is actually thread. That is basically, it's a silk core and there's a thin gold foil wrapped all the way around it to make a solid gold thread. So when they say embroidered in gold, that's not just like a gold color, it's real gold. So this is a very expensive, little tiny, beautiful luxury shroud for this bird. So this is actually a very beautiful kind of funeral for this nightingale. Right. She called one of her servants, charged him with her message, and sent him to her love. The messenger came to the knight, greeted him in the name of the lady, related the whole message to him, and presented the nightingale. Right. So this now becomes a sort of love token between them. It's a very, very sad, this is such a sad love token. It is so heartbreaking. When everything had been told and revealed to the knight, after he had listened well, he was very sad about the adventure. But he wasn't mean or hesitant. He had a small vessel fashioned with no iron or steel in it. It was all pure gold and good stones, very precious and very dear. Right, so it's very important that you know, you the reader, you the listener, know that this is not some cheaply made vessel that's some lesser metal on the inside and just plated in gold or covered in gold or gilt in gold on the outside, or some alloy, right? It's pure gold, right? We need to know that. We need to understand that as the reader. That's why it's small vessel is fashioned with no iron or steel in it. But also, isn't it interesting, Takeda, that in the 12th century, they're clearly acknowledging that there's a difference between those two metals, right? The cover was very carefully attached, and the knight placed the nightingale inside and then had the casket sealed. And he carried it with him always. And thus, the nightingale is interred. It is sealed in a casket in the way that relics are sealed in a casket in this era, in the way that saints are sealed in caskets in this era, in the way that sometimes hearts were actually sealed in caskets in this era. So very often, if a knight died abroad, like King Richard of England, when a knight died abroad, it was very unlikely they were going to get his whole body back to his homeland. And so they would actually remove key parts and send the key parts back. And the heart was one of the parts that was very often sent back to a knight's homeland. And so this nightingale is absolutely a metaphor for love. This nightingale is a stand-in for the lady's heart. And that hence the allusion earlier on to the husband throwing this poor murdered bird at her body and leaving a speck of blood on her breast. And I'm pretty certain it was her left breast, right? So the nightingale becomes a metaphor for the heart and a metaphor for their love. And so now the knight has her heart, the nightingale, in this beautiful reliquary, a relic of their love, and he carries it with him always. The end. Laustic, the tale of the nightingale. Okay, so any questions about the tale of the nightingale? It's the sun. You may have told it's now cold. It's now dark. The sun has set, and it is growing cold. My fingers are numb. I can't feel them anymore. It was nice and warm when we departed for our adventure, and now it is no more. And that's also why the lighting is kind of strange and not necessarily the most flattering. But there it is. No, the lighting is not super great. Well, if you've been enjoying this medieval story time, please like and subscribe. We're going to go walk somewhere where my hands can resume feeling again. And we can get some tea that's actually hot instead of my tea, which is very not hot now. But tomorrow we'll be doing medieval tomorrow. So in about, what time is it now?
7:30.
In about 13 hours, roughly, I'll be doing my medieval cooking party, and we will be exploring medieval Lenten foods. So we will be exploring some of the medieval dishes that were eaten in this time of the year, and one of them is actually a medieval refried beans recipe, which I thought some of you who are familiar with Tex-Mex cuisine might find very interesting to see how some things have never changed. Yep. Yeah, if you've enjoyed, please like and subscribe. I'd like to thank my channel members and my patrons and my Facebook subscribers for supporting my work. I'd like to thank all of you who have left super chats and all those little gifts. If you had questions about our medieval story time, I guess about anything we discussed in the live stream, and I didn't answer them, please pop them in the comments and we will respond to them. Otherwise, everyone, until next time, hopefully in 13 hours, may your adventures in learning about history be creative and unexpected. Good night, everyone.